your first lecture, there's a little story here. There are a few seats over here, there are a couple back there, some over here, and we can start putting up folding chairs in the back then. Oh, this is wonderful. The problem was, we had a problem, and it was a serious one. We have this wonderful auditorium, and we have wonderful curtains. I'll just demonstrate them so you can see how wonderful they are, although we really don't need them in the night. Curtains come down, so we can have daytime programs. And this was just wonderful, except light coming between the curtains would show right on the screen. And there would be these great big lines going up and down the screen. This was disaster. And we went through a number of problem-solving ideas. How would we solve the problem? And we finally came up with the idea of putting banners between the curtains. And, yes, thank you, Hannah. Those are the banners. What they are, they're curtain material with blackout curtain in the inside. So they really are light abatement curtains. And I have to thank members of my board, several of whom are here tonight, who let me buy them without having the money to pay for them. But I said, we'll find the money somehow, and it seemed logical, since this is a lecture hall, to raise the money with benefit lectures. And since banner means a strip of cloth, but it also means the best of the outstanding, the best of the best, I thought if I could get banner quality lecturers here, and people would come and pay to hear these people. The only reason this whole system works so well for us is because our lecturers donate their time to help us out. So in our first section, we had Ray Stonecipher, we had Charlotte Lucas, we had Al Schneider, and we had Orv Shaw. In this series, we had last week, we had a wonderful talk by Bill Latch. And next week, we're going to have Karen Newbern from the Ridges talking about orchids of Door County. And the week after that, we will have Doug Henderson from the Maritime Museum talking about lighthouses. In fact, he's going to come dressed as a lighthouse keeper and talk about his life in first person. So that should be fun. I need to ask a couple questions because I'm already getting, I can't believe this, banner quality volunteers for Lecture Series 3. But as winter comes, I need to know, are evening lectures better or are weekend afternoons better? How many would prefer to come at 7 o'clock in the evening to a lecture in, say, February or some obscure time like that? How many would rather come, say, at 2 o'clock on a Saturday? Okay, we're split right down the middle. That's what I needed to know. Okay, and isn't that Door County for you? This evening we are very lucky to have Gary Stoll with us. He's a graduate of Sturgeon Bay High School, and from there he went on to the University of Wisconsin at Green Bay, and he studied regional analysis. He is a member of the Wisconsin Speleological Society, and he's representing them tonight. And better than anybody else I know, he knows about Door County caves. And so you didn't come to hear me talk, you came to hear Gary, and so I'm going to stop and welcome Gary Stoll.
Thank you, Coggin. I really am pleased to see an outstanding turnout. I just didn't know how many we'd get for this particular presentation, and I guess if there's anything that makes me more nervous, I don't know if it's seen hardly anyone show up or seen way too many show up, but it's great. It's a wonderful county. They've got a wonderful facility here, and I'm very honored to be able to help them out in a fundraising event. Now, tonight we're going to have a very unusual experience. Maybe this is one of the reasons why it's a hidden wonder of Door County. We all know Door County has more lighthouses than any other county in the entire United States. We also know that it has more state parks, 5 and a state trail. Well, we also have some outstanding underground records as well. And I'm not talking now about shorelines around the county, which we know is yet another record, but the underground features in the county. Now, before I begin, I would like to point out we're honored here tonight too to have some other members of our organization here. We have, stand up Bob, Bob Bultman, he's our Cave Conservation Chairman from Bailey's Harbor. JD and Allison, they're very attuned to the latest conservation methods in caves, and they're from Manitowoc area, so if you have any questions, Maribel Caves and that, they'd be ideal people to talk to afterwards. We also have Anita Schlomer, who has been an active member in, Anita, raise your hand. She's also a photographer and has had pictures published in our newsletter. And before I forget, I might as well point out, we're going to have some brochures later. We have a limited number on the Wisconsin Speleological Society. I don't know if we're going to mention it later, but anyway, we do have a newsletter that comes out, of all things, the Hollow Earth News. And we have a statewide membership of about 130, I believe, roughly, depending if you want to count all the family members in that. We do meet once a month on the third Saturday usually. It is at Ledgeview Nature Center. And we also are going to be having, of all things, a cave trip, which Bob will talk about, to Horseshoe Bay Cave, which is a rare opportunity to go underground. Now, I have some other brochures here too, but we can talk about that later. I would like to point out that tonight we're going to take an underground journey between the Rocky Spine and as far down as 129 feet under Door County. Now, as P.T. Barnum once said, it's the greatest show under Earth. But as some of the cavers will tell you, when you're crawling along in mud, water that's 46 degrees Fahrenheit, going up and down pits, areas with as little as 4 inches of airspace, and bats swirling overhead. I also remember the saying P.T. Barnum once said, a sucker is born every minute. Having said that, let's talk a little bit. Let's start out with Door County. We got not only our second longest cave, now I say longest, but we just got a cave called Crystal Cave that beat Horseshoe Bay Cave out for the longest cave in Wisconsin, and it's about 4,000 feet in length. Horseshoe Bay Cave is second. At 3,103 feet, it still goes. Only cave that I am fully aware of in northeast Wisconsin with air-filled passageway that we have never found the end of it. And that's something to think about. We also have the fourth longest cave in all of Wisconsin. We have the deepest vertical drop cave known in all of Wisconsin, all right here. So we got a lot of records going for us. How many caves in Wisconsin? Well, if we look at Door County first, we got about 30 to 40 caves or cave-related features. Now, if you want to throw in sea caves, of course, you have more. Wisconsin, as a state, we got about approximately 400 what you'd refer to as true caves, probably another 200 sea caves, basically on the shores of Lake Superior and Lake Michigan. Now let's expand outward. I mentioned our grotto, Wisconsin Speleological Society. We belong also to the National Speleological Society, and we have about 12,000 members. Actually, they're worldwide, but the majority of them are from the United States. In the United States now we have 50 to 80,000 known caves. For every known cave in an area, there's believed to be one unknown cave or virgin or unexplored cave that's still waiting for that lure of excitement. Okay, I might point out that the grottos are all working together under the banner of the National Speleological Society. It's the largest single organization known in the world. Now, what's amazing about caves? If you think about it, any one of you, all right, we have taken, and if you had an oxygen tank and mountain climbing gear, we have gone up to the top of the tallest known peak on Earth, Mount Everest, 29,000 square feet. Let's go one step further. We've got expensive rockets take at least a dozen men to the moon. And maybe not in our lifetime, but they're actually going to end up on Mars someday. I have no doubt about that. We've also had expensive submarines gone down 7 miles into the Mariana Trench. And we have found the bottom of the deepest point just off Southeast Asia in the Pacific Ocean. So we've done all this. But do you know that any one of you, and I don't care what your age is, as long as you got that feeling of adventure, you all could be finding virgin or unexplored cave. It's the last frontier known. You don't need a fancy oxygen equipment and tank. You don't need a fancy rocket. You don't need a submarine. Tomorrow, we could all find virgin cave. And what's even more exciting is you could say, we want the blueprint. I say, Colin, give me the blueprint for this building. So yep, we know there's a janitorial room there, we know that there's a utility room underneath, we know there's a kitchen area off there. But in a cave, we could work for decades trying to explore a cave, and suddenly tomorrow we didn't realize that there was a virgin cave right under our feet. In fact, we had that situation happen in Door County when we thought there were no known caves in the city limits. Are you people in for a surprise tonight? Now, there's 3 different types of caves found in Door County. You all know about the sea caves. The sea caves are the result of the crashing of waves against the Niagara dolomite. Because of its magnesium content, it's a little less soluble than your usual limestones that are down around Kentucky. And we also have vadose-formed or stream-formed caves. Now, all this, of course, is in Niagara dolomite or the dolestone. Your stream-formed caves are vadose with phreatic chambers that have formed by the dissolving action of water. We also have a very unique cave that's formed along either a fault, or it's a Block Creek type fault, or possibly evidence of a tremor in the Earth's surface that might have caused the crust to break apart literally thousands of years ago. Our caves are relatively young. They're about 60,000 years old. Actually, probably a lot of them, I know Bob would say they're much older. They survived the last glacier of 10 to 12,000 years ago. We also know that it helped us because that gave Door County an opportunity to have more caves than any other county in the entire eastern half of Wisconsin. Now, our caves aren't big. I know this is going to come up in the question and answer period, so I might as well get it out of the way right now. Longest cave in the world, Mammoth Cave. Mammoth Cave has 200 and, I'll take that back, I gotta think a second. Mammoth Cave has 352 map miles of passageway. We have a lake called the Lost Sea in Sweetwater, Tennessee. They say it's the largest in the world. I know there's one in Africa. It's a little bit bigger, but you go on glass-bottom boats. It's a 4.5-acre underground lake. The largest chamber in the world, Sarawak Chamber on the island of Borneo, can put 16 747 aircraft carrier all in there and have room left over. 8 million people a year go underground to tour the show caves of the country. This is a brochure that's free. I have copies for everyone. It's the National Caves Association. Has photos of the most outstanding ones. You're welcome to pick up a copy afterwards. And at the conclusion of my slide presentation, I will show a little bit briefly of equipment. I'm sure Bob has some things he would like to talk about. And are there any questions so far on anything? Any questions? No one's sleeping yet? Okay, that's a good sign. Now, what I've got here is where are the caves in Door County? That's the next question. And of course, we'll talk about the lure, why we want to explore them. This is a chart of all the known cave locations, including one that, believe it or not, just opened up in the last couple months. Farmers going along, saw steam coming out of the ground, thought, gee, I'm going to stop, take a look. Rushed home, got a ladder. He found a cave. We call it Mailport Cave. It's in southern part of Door County. And we're in the process now of studying it. And most of your caves are along the Niagara escarpment of the western shore of Door County. And most of them are horizontal, some are vertical pit caves. We have an area south of Egg Harbor, as many of you know, it contains the longest Horseshoe Bay Cave. Also Southern Door High School and around Brussels Hill area. And Brussels Hill, by the way, is the second highest point in Door County, where the radio towers are out here is 20 feet higher. I have all the major statistics on the caves here, but I think what I'm going to do is go into the slide presentation in the interest of time, and then if there are questions left over, you're welcome to come up and take a look at this chart. So at this time, I think I'm going to go directly into the slide presentation. Okay? So if we can turn this on. I think I got a slide vibrating here, but I'm just going to back, there we go. Okay. We're going to begin our underground tour courtesy of a friend's airplane from Chicago. What you're looking at, I got to get my little device here. What you're looking at is Lake Michigan in the background here, and the frozen shores of Green Bay in the foreground. This is Murphy County Park at a point about 2.5 miles south of Egg Harbor, and the Horseshoe Bay farms are way over here. This is all developed now as a golf course with the clubhouse here, and the private clubhouse is over here. This three-corner road intersection has very, very strategic implications, because if you were to take and go from here, follow this white fence, go up 10 feet in the bluff, you'd find the only known natural entrance to the cave goes back under this three-corner road intersection. One section goes off with a huge room right about here. The main cave goes off this way. Now I know you've all heard the rumor that the cave goes clear across the county. We know that's not true, because we have gone through flowstone that takes about 1 inch to grow 100 years, and formations as well. And we know that it was at least 600 years that no one has been in there. And that pretty much precludes our modern day man. Also, we have found through a soil mineral analysis that I did while attending the University of Wisconsin Green Bay that there's no Indian habitation in this cave, but that's not to say that there could have been in others. This is a map of Horseshoe Bay Cave, and here you see the natural entrance way up on top. And it was discovered in 1879 as a small hole through which water emerged. It was enlarged, and they followed this passageway back to a wall about 8 to 10 feet high. And crawling up this wall, you continue on. There's a passage split for about 150 feet. Come underneath, and here's a big room with about a 50 to 55 foot high ceiling. And you continue on for 1,740 feet. That was how far the cave existed back in September of 1978. At that time, a gal from Michigan came over and showed us all how to really explore cave. She got through, and by golly, if she didn't discover a major underground river flowing underneath Door County. And believe it or not, even a 40-foot intermittent underground waterfall. Now, I did go over this in detail, but we do have some rules for cave. One of them is you always ask the owner for permission. In this case, it's the Culls family, and they're still in control of the cave. In this particular case, though, Horseshoe Bay Farms has asked us as of August 1986 to gate the cave, and we are probably the controlling interest right now. And Bob will tell you a little later about a trip that's going to be going in January if people want to see the cave. There'll be different levels offered. This is the only known natural entrance, and it's the remains of a much larger cave system that was largely destroyed by the glacier that carved out Green Bay. And what you see in front is the remains of a passageway. And of course the cave did survive the last glacier 10 to 12,000 years ago, the part that's left. Once inside, you see the layering of the rock. And this is the start of probably the easiest part of the cave for several hundred feet. It's basically a duck under. We have found out that there's about 3 feet of loose soil underneath. So if that was removed, the cave would be about 6 foot high walking passageway. And I might point out in the 1920s, the Door County Chamber of Commerce even evaluated the cave for its commercial potential. This is looking out before the entrance was gated by the Wisconsin Speleological Society. The waters of Green Bay be in the distance. This is a wintertime view. People think, well, why would you want to go in the cave in the winter? Well, just think about it. This is what we know about Door County caves. We know that they have about 90% relative humidity. The temperature is the average of the area that they are found in. So here in Door County, if you throw out the cold of winter and the warm of summer, it's 46 degrees Fahrenheit all year long. It's also what we call total darkness. It's 40% darker than the darkest moonless night you'll ever experience in your lifetime. Why cave in the winter? Because we got an area that's got as little as 4 inches of airspace. So we have no sudden fluctuation in the underground water table because of rainstorms or anything at that time. And as you can see here, we have wetsuits. This is a group that came up, and when they had a storm that not even the police were out, we were underground over a half mile. And when we finally got out, it was like we were, everything was in perspective. We come out, we felt like we'd just come out of a journey to the center of the earth. And the fact the roads were clogged was just nothing. It felt great to be able to stand up, walk around, and not have to crawl. Now, here's another way you can tell if you find a cave. You can see that there's no snow around the cave entrance. That's because in the winter, of course, they're warm, in the summer they're cool, and the snow has melted away. And this is definitely the case here with Horseshoe Bay Cave's entrance. And I have seen water flow out of the entrance, by the way. Now, why do we gate caves? Well, stalactites grow at the rate of approximately, and it varies, 1 inch per 100 years. And here's the remains of stalactites. And you can see where they've all been vandalized by literally thousands of tourists that have gone into the cave. This is a natural dome in the ceiling. Very, very stable. I might point out that if you could be out in a field, you could be in a cave, or you could be in your own home in the event of an earthquake. Believe it or not, the cave would be far better than being in your own home. We've had cavers in a cave in California, and they felt a little bit of vibration, not much, and they came out, and here were whole homes laying in shambles on the surface. And you got to remember, caves are not mines. Man has gone in and undermined a natural feature, whereas with a cave, this is all waterborne from one solid piece of rock. Here we're continuing on. You can see the start of a standing water. You're basically exploring an underground river channel. The trick is to try to keep yourself dry on the way in. On the way out, you're basically on the way out, and time is more important because you have gotten wet to keep moving. So he's got everything in a waterproof ammo box, and he has one of the types of lights, electric, and he's trying to prevent hypothermia. And hypothermia results when your body core temperature drops faster and your body cannot replenish the lost heat. And what I like to use is block-type chocolate. It works great when you get back there, and after taking some, about 10-15 minutes, you feel really good again. This is the top of an 8 to 10 foot wall. The cave dramatically changes in character about, I would say, 250-300 feet in. And once you get up on top, instead of having ground, you got a bedrock floor. And the blue tin is because of the type of film that was used. But you can see the large breakdown blocks laying on the floor here, and they fell literally thousands of years ago from the ceiling. You can also see a stalagmite. Has a G in it, also G stands for ground. It is formed on the floor, and that is right over here. Here we got the elephant's ear. It's a formation near the back of the cave, far back from where most people would travel, and you get a little idea of how much beauty Horseshoe Bay Cave does have in its more remote section. This is a caver from Green Bay, and he's at the entrance to the Onyx Room. You can see a little rimstone dam right where his hand is. And this is one of the more beautiful rooms too, in the first 1,740 feet of passageway. And of course, we know that calcite is translucent, and here you can see a light is put behind it so you can see the reflective value of it. Now let's tie together some of the educational concepts that we've learned. When you come and see a view like this, you immediately can tell that this is a water-worn cave wall that has broke free at one time and dropped down. But you know it's not recent, because look, you've got at least 6 inches of flowstone and what we call a column, stretching from floor to ceiling there. So we know in the last 600 years, these have at least been there, probably thousands of years. Here's more flowstone and stalactites. Beautiful column, tallest in Door County, the elephant's trunk, some call it. And this is thought to be the last room in the cave up till September of 1978, when we had a hodag hunt event here. In that year, a gal from Michigan dug out a trench in the back here and removed some sediment. And if you were to go down this tiny crevice and turn to the right, put your arms out in front of you, and start going down a slight slope downward, you launch yourself into a pool of water and immediately discover a stream that's about 3 feet deep and can be 8 to 10 feet wide in places, and went for 300 feet. This is just one room in there, and this particular room has about a 30-foot high ceiling, and you can see the stream down below. Now we're going to move on. I might point out the cave was 3,103 feet in length. Divers went through 52 feet of flooded passageway at the end, and they find that the cave still keeps going. It's just a matter of digging more. Paradise Pit Cave. I discovered this on July 20th, 1968. This was a 28-foot deep crevice. Hunters knew about it, but no one had ever gone down it because it was filled with garbage. And this is very unfortunate. This is one of the things we do not want to see. In fact, we're trying to promote a cave conservation law at this time to keep debris and contaminants that can contaminate the underground water table out of these pits. When I got halfway down, I removed several logs and the floor gave way. I was quite excited though, because this is the first view I saw. You can see the iron oxide coloring in the upper left, and this was the top of the cathedral room. Here we're coming down the rubble pile towards the main cave passageway. And this is a typical cross section. It's about 3 feet high, although eventually we found 46 rooms with heights up to 23 feet. And you can see the muck on the caver's clothing here. This is what you have to contend with in a lot of caves that are not developed for tourists. Typical scene of the true color inside a cave. He's using a carbide light, which I will show you later. Interesting view here. This is showing where the cave, which is called Paradise Pit Cave in southern Door County, floods every spring. It's on property owned by John Kellner. And right where the line is here, you notice the color changes. Spring of the year, the water floods to this level and then slowly starts receding. What do you notice? Big sump, that's right. One of two that I know of in the cave. When the water goes into that sump, it slowly works its way down, probably to a lower level of tight crevices and probably passageways that no man will ever be able to get into. Not only because they're too small, but probably water-filled. And of course, the 9-foot high Dream River room. I named this room because it has kind of like a cathedral-type ceiling and it looks very similar to a room in Cave of the Mountains. Now, other cavers went further here until they came to a rubble breakdown indicating another entrance, but it had filled in by debris from the glaciers. So we backed up, and remember what I said about you could work all of your lifetime in a building and not realize the cave was right around the corner. Well, in October 23rd of 1968, we moved a large wash tub in this area right here in the center, and guess what? We had a virgin cave passage going off into the unknown. Tremendously exciting experience. We got in, we found out we weren't the first visitors. There were a lot of four-legged animals, including deer. We've had, of course, bats from time to time, a lot of surface animals that have fallen in, rabbits. And I will tell you one unusual experience I had. My arms were pinned tight to my side as I was exploring through one little passageway. I heard a funny noise. I looked up. You'll never believe what I was looking right at. Live skunk. It isn't in the rule books, but let me tell you, you learn how to do reverse caving in a hurry. And here we got the diamond room, named because of its shape. And this particular room has a bacon strip stalactite coming down the far side. And I'm going to back this up just a little bit so you get a little better view of... Now it doesn't look like it's going to go back too much. Oh, wait a minute, what am I doing? I'm going the wrong way. There we go, that should help a little. Anyway, this is a diamond room. And this particular room, like I said, is shaped like a diamond. And it has this rare bacon strip stalactite coming out the far wall. Snowball room, named because of how white it is. And you can see some formations on the wall behind. Note that there are no names on the walls in this cave. And that's because we have not permitted people to go in there. This is a gated cave, and unfortunately when caves aren't gated and not protected, that's usually one of the first things that happens. And once names are in these walls, especially if they're on formations of flowstone, it's just about impossible to get the names off. This here is looking up. This is called a living cave. There's droplets of water on these formations. So that means they're still forming, and you can see the pure white calcite on the walls. And this is looking straight up into the 13-foot high dome ceiling. Here we got an area that's very interesting. This is a low area in the cave, and unlike the 129-foot long passage we first found, this 200 or 300-foot passage that we found, we tried to stay on the side walls here, bridging around this corner. This muck is unbelievable. If you don't have your shoes tied on or your boots tightly, you're in big trouble. Eventually, getting around the corner, we noticed that there's an indication of another entrance that got filled in by the glacier up ahead because of all the deposits of loose material and sand and that. We knew there was another room behind because if you look way up here, you could see through and see that there was another chamber beyond. So we dug through, and this caver here is a gal, and gals are very, very good cavers. They're agile, they're small, they can maneuver easily, and she came up and showed the guys how to get through and continue on finding more cave. Now we mapped where we couldn't get any further. We started a surface dig after measuring on the surface, and 7 years of digging, we finally hand dug a pit almost 30 feet deep. And we worked every single Saturday and Sunday except for the winter months. And it was also a joke almost, say we couldn't wait to get back to work on Monday so we could rest. And this is a view looking down from the top. What did we find? 830 or so feet more passageway, including a room up to 23 feet in height. Now we went back the other direction, mapped out where we left off, and this is the owner, John Kellner, fogging for mosquitoes and starting another surface dig to try to find more cave. I might add today this cave has 4 entrances. Here you can see where we dug down. The glacial till and loose material has been cut down, and here you got your first indication of bedrock. And you can tell it's natural cave. You can see the water-worn rock. This is an excellent view showing how digging progressed. And cavers are quite resourceful. They took the trees, laid them on their side to hold back the dirt. Where I'm standing back here, this is all an open area now, and there's a natural bridge across the center. Since then, the owner has had to cover this area, but it was later opened up here. One of the cavers brought in a motor, and we're originally going to sit here and use this spoke here to try to work it like a bicycle, but it didn't work out too well. So we used a motorized winch. Here's a hand winch taking out a rock that weighs up to 300 pounds. And one person could do that. And we put it in a sling like that. Also had special buckets I had made that were reinforced so we wouldn't wear them out. And this is the bucket on its way up. John Kellner had electricity brought to the site. You notice the street light way up on top. It was kind of crazy. We'd work sometimes at night, sometimes in a rainstorm. One group would work while the other would rest. And it's amazing how much could be accomplished. Occasionally we run into a boulder. This one here is a dolomite boulder. So we drill a hole into it because it was just too big to try to lift out. We couldn't break it apart with a sledgehammer. It's not part of the cave walls. This was a boulder that was stuck in the ground. And we put in a little bit of black powder and blasted it out of the way just enough to break it apart so we could take out the sections. And this is continuing on digging downward. Notice what we call the tip of the pit. The edge here is all clean of rock. I've been hit on the head, even though I wore a helmet, from 30 feet with an apple. And I tell you, it sounded like the world was coming to an end when you hit. You couldn't believe the impact, so we try to keep the ground away as much as we can. Here you see a hydro crane brought to the site by the owner. And luckily for us, he could operate it and bring out 55-gallon drumfuls of dirt weighing 300 pounds at one time. Now, what was our reward? Right here. This little tight little opening has since been enlarged. This rock here has been removed, and we have a walking passage that goes back a relatively short distance, but then continues on for another 636 feet more of cave, for a total length of 1,791 feet. Now, you'd have thought we'd learned our lesson and not want to start all over with another project. But Elaine Rohde, who some of you may know from southern Door County, told us that she had a barn-sized room. And she said, oh, so many loads of stone were put into it, and would like us to dig it out. And it was only a quarter-mile away. And we thought, well, sounds good, but it's a lot of work. She said, no, 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 she says, we're going to have lots of help for you. She said, I'll make sure you have help. So we took her on her word. We told her we'd haul the dirt away, make a gate for the cave. Well, the help arrived, but it wasn't exactly what we were expecting. They were something else. In fact, I'm afraid they were a little too friendly. You see this gate over here in the far corner? It's steel. That was placed over the entrance, and then we had a trapdoor on that. We had to make it heavy enough that if a cow were to stand on it, it wouldn't go through. We had a padlock there, and I had the keys for the cave. The next time I came, I found out the cows were very inquisitive. When I come to try to get at the padlock, there was the world's biggest cow patty right on top of it. I had to try to dig it all out first before I could get to the padlock. I think the third or fourth time I came there, I reached underneath. We had to kind of protect it from hacksawing. And here there was a wasp nest, and I got nailed again. But anyway, here's the dirt getting hauled away with the trailers, hauled to nearby Kellner property. This is about 1980 now. Here again, remember the clean tip I told you about where we want to expose the bedrock so we can see what we got? We have since done this with Mailport Cave prior to a gating that we are planned for. This is the problem. That is a granite boulder, courtesy of the glacier and our fellow country to the north, Canada. And I don't know if any of you ever taken a sledgehammer and tried to smack a granite boulder, but it'll bounce right back in your face. Luckily for us, one of our stronger members was able to reach in there, grab a hold of that, and pull it out of the way. And we continued digging downward. And of course, we nowadays try to be a little more mechanized, but in those days, we had hand loops on the rope, and we get very tiring. But we say it's good exercise for you. And what we did was not find a barn-sized room at the bottom. It went down about 22 feet, and we had a room about 8 feet or so in length by 8 feet high. And that was the extent of what we call Roadie Cave. Back up to 1970, we had a situation where the Industrial Resources and Tourism class, Southern Door High School, George Emmerich was the instructor, had students roll back here again, another granite boulder, and found the passage, or a pit going down into some kind of room. And he wanted someone a little more experienced to come out, not a student, and he called me. And before he could hang up the phone, I was halfway to the cave. I met him there, and we went down, and sure enough, it was a virgin cave. I should say I went down, he was on the surface. And the woodworking class put this building up over it. And since then, believe it or not, one big tree in a windstorm came down and smashed the whole roof, but they rebuilt it. Had a lot of publicity, even got in the papers as far away as the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel at the time. This is the open door cave that they gave the name for it. And if you look, you can see where the material is held back again by cinder blocks. And you've got about maybe 3 feet here of material. To really find a lot of caves, you've got to look where there's at least, or no more I should say, than 2 feet ideally of loose material over bedrock. That's why you got no caves really on the eastern half of the county, but the western side, along the ridge and the escarpment, you got a lot more caves. Here you're working your way down to the chimney technique where you have 3 points of contact at any given moment. Notice the flame on the carbide lamp. Since then, cavers have pretty well gone electric in your smaller caves up here. Coming down, and then this is the final view of the room. There's a lake there, and it's got 16 feet at least of water there. They built this little bridge over it. There's a dome at the far end that goes up 16 feet. Notice the sculpturing of the rock in the background. That cave is dated by the Northeast Wisconsin Technical Institute today. Now, in the early years, let's back up a little bit. Interested in history. As a graduate historian, I'm very interested in how they use these early caves. Well, if you weren't exactly rich in the old days, you wanted a source of water. So what you do is you go and you find a natural opening going down to the water table. Of course, nowadays they spin around it. Where do you have an idea this might be located? Believe it or not, one room in this cave comes within 9 feet of the basement of the Leon Vogel farm home. And there's the entrance to the cave right behind Southern Door High School. And let's take a little tour of the cave. It's kind of nice. You got an armchair tour. You don't have to worry about coming home with anything muddy or worrying about lights and that. The farmer, it used to be Henry Vogel, very hospitable, and lowered this ladder down for us. Looking back up, looking towards that room, and here's a little better close-up view of the interior of that room. Very, very nice. Then if you look the other way, and now look down, you see an underground lake. Not very big, but it is nonetheless a lake. And if you look in the center, you see a dark area. At one time, that area was exposed, and there was another room on the other side about 3 feet high. I think he called it the cloverleaf room. Oh man, here we go again. The chairman of the Wisconsin Speleological Society, they say the most dangerous thing is going to and from a cave, because caves are quite safe. And I think that's true because our chairman was killed in a motorcycle accident that founded the Wisconsin Speleological Society back in 1960. We were told the easiest way to go to this cave would be to drive straight across this field. We thought, great, we'll do it. Well, we got halfway across before she forgot to tell us that we were right in the middle of a, you guessed it, manure pile. And the driver, he very conveniently said, oh, well, I can't reach my boots. And he climbed out through the window onto the hood of the car. He had to get a picture. Well, I had the honors of trying to take and shovel the manure away from the back tires. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been over and tried to push a car out of a manure pile, but once the tires start spinning, if you haven't been baptized, I guarantee you will be. We arrived at the scene, and as you can tell, unfortunately, this is called Rathy Cave. It was a scene where a farmer had dumped material into the cave. And I've had more people call me up and ask if it's okay to do this. And I try to warn them no, because if you got any kind of household contaminants that get into that cave, it'll go immediately down to your water table, contaminate your well water. Also, it clogs up the drainage system. A farmer called me back in the spring, another farmer, and says, boy, he says, I wish I'd listened. He says, it's already the end of June. He said, I can't get the water off my field. He said, never did this before I filled in that big sinkhole on my property. So this is one unfortunate situation. And that cave, by the way, is about 40 feet in length, goes 30 feet deep, and has 2 little entrances. Lautenbach property, as Bob Boltman here can tell you a little later, this here is a little pit. It just was preserved at land acquisition. And it's about 75 feet of passage. This is a little pit. Looking back out, this is just south of Egg Harbor and also south of Horseshoe Bay Farms. Big pit. Here again, it's a section of cave that collapsed thousands of years ago, the ceiling gave way, and there's 2 little rooms on each end here. And this is looking back out. Welliver Cave. I know there's a gentleman that called me today, wanted to come down from Green Bay, and was interested in some property in the Horseshoe Bay Farms area. And I might point out that this is on Horseshoe Bay Farms. This is probably one of the more impressive sea caves. And it was a scene in September of 1988 of an underground wedding. A little bit more on that later. This is looking out from the cave. The water of Green Bay is just beyond the tree line in the distance. Real interesting cave. Very large, 2 rooms. Here you can see some of the rooms. I got a call from 2 cavers from Hillsboro, Wisconsin. They said, Gary, could you arrange for us? We'd like to be a best man. We'd like you to arrange for a minister and a suitable cave to get married in. And of course I kept thinking, well, how suitable do they want it, depending on the interest of cavers. And trust me, there are cavers that really like mud and water. But I thought, well, we'll do what we can. So I decided this would be the best cave for it. Had taped wedding music. This is the actual weddings. Many of you know Reverend Phil Sweet from Hope Congregational Church. And it was kind of interesting. I insisted he stand up so that we could get a better camera angle because they wanted to cover it for the Door County Advocate at their request. And so it worked out really good. The cavers are getting married, Polly and Craig Bednar. The candelabra there. And of course we had to have an imitation bat hanging in front of me here, hanging down. Birch bark cross up on top. We had a gentleman from Minnesota play the mountain dulcimer, although a lot of cavers thought that it wouldn't be disrespectful at a wedding, rock music would be more important. Stick around to get better. We had a mighty blast on October 20th, 1973 that shook the city of Sturgeon Bay. And something truly remarkable happened. The first known cave within the city limits of the city, and the only cave of its type in terms of how it was formed. And this one, before anyone asks, I will unfortunately tell you, is not open to the public, even though we've had geologists come from Marshall University, Huntington, West Virginia, and the University of Iowa. because it's got very rare fossils that can be easily brushed off from the walls of the cave. And this was the entrance to the north section when it was blasted into. One cave system about 400 feet in length with 55 feet of the center part of the cave removed for the construction of the basement of a nursing home. I heard about it. I was attending the University of Wisconsin. I immediately rushed to the site. And along with John Kellner, who was very active in our group and still is, we went into the cave and we removed a large rock. Now someone else said, no, the cave doesn't go anywhere. Well, we were able to go in there and we were able to remove a large rock. And I quick did a study because we found some walking passageway. And I convinced the owners we'd do a nice display for them, nice favorable publicity for the Dorchester Nursing Center. And at the same time, it would help us to protect the cave. And so as a result, you can see where the cement has been poured around the tunnel entrance there. Those forms will eventually come out. The building in the background is the old boiler room. Now think about this. Here again, it ties in with what I said before. All these years, people were being born and people were dying 6.5 feet above this cave, and they never knew it existed. So even though it might sound crazy to say that there's a cave possibly anywhere in the county, including maybe right here for all we know, there's an example. Here's the tunnel entrance to the south section of the cave. And here's the Dorchester Cave, or Dorchester Nursing Center under construction. It's the old former site now of the Eglin Memorial Hospital, right off from Jefferson Street. So now let's sit back and, as they say, take an armchair tour of the Dorchester Cave. You arrive, kind of appropriate, fall of the year. Come up. By the way, fall of the year and winter are your two best times to go caving. Now this one here, ideally, is winter, is excellent. When you arrive in this particular view, this wing here has no basement. Dining room is right here. This wing going off here has a basement. The cave is entered through the basement, comes back underneath the parking lot, and continues on. And we know it goes for probably a couple of blocks geologically, although we've only been able to travel through it to the edge of the parking lot. This is the back side. The cave is entered back in the basement here and comes underneath this wing. Now, a lot of caves you got to climb to get down into them. They're very rough, very difficult, and this cave is a little bit different. You let your fingers do the walking as you take the elevator down. Only wild cave that I know of in Wisconsin that you have elevator service. Once down there, you get to remove a number of assorted bedpans and other goodies. Another unique novelty for this cave. And I agreed to provide steel doors and padlocks if the cave would be safe. And so here's what happened. Here the basement was finished off. This steel door has since been replaced by members of the Wisconsin Speleological Society with an aluminum door because the steel started to rust because of the humidity in this section. If you look in there, this is going towards Jefferson Street. Drop down 7 feet and then look straight ahead. You lay on your side, and this is a typical cross section. And you can actually go out halfway under Jefferson Street and hear the clicks of cars overhead. South section of the Dorchester Cave. Here again, steel door. Unlock it, and we've had a very, very good working relationship now for over a quarter of a century with the Dorchester. I've been very concerned about proper etiquette in terms of getting any mud in the nursing home, putting everything back. The janitors often joke they can tell when I come to the cave because it's cleaner than how they have it. And once you open the door, and of course I lay this out, I think some of the patients and residents would have heart attacks if they saw the cavers walk out, how they really look sometimes if they didn't change their clothes in the basement. Anyway, you go straight ahead, you drop down, and you enter the cave. And the cave's wider than the entrance tunnel, which is 6 feet long. That's the basement wall in the distance. Here I am crawling over rocks in the cave. There's a 3-foot void there, and another 15 feet of loose bedrock material underneath. So it'd be an 18-foot crevice. And it could be a block creep type cave where one wall offset from the other because at one time, the whole landscape could have moved at this point. I know the Menominee River, the valley here was carved through. Also, there's theory that it might have been an indication of a former earthquake that caused a shift in the Earth's crust. In either case, it was long before man was around. The floor drops down. You can see the layers of chert. look at this cave. Now, some of the caves that are here too, I know, will appreciate. I know JD would, seeing how it's squared off. Totally different from any other type cave that you're used to. It's like a hallway. 7-foot high Penning's Hall. This is not the highest part of the hallway, but you get an idea. You see the layering of church. Here again, another view of the hallway. When it's only 5 blocks from your home, you just can't resist not trying to save a cave like this. And here's the layers of chert. There's also a little fossil on the roof there above the head. More chert. Here's some of the coral formations. Notice up on top, you got a way up, you got a little like cup coral.
Yeah.
And here's a tight squeeze. They hit a little dome at the back of the cave and working on the parking lot. How tight an opening can people get through? Well, if it's at least 8 inches, you can crawl through pretty much. 10 inches, foot would be ideal. In this cave, we're struggling through to find more cave. We had a crawl box contest one time, and we had a kid, now keep in mind a kid, not an adult, believe it or not, squeeze through. The skull and shoulders are the limiting factors, and the pelvic region, 5.5 inches. He was a little kid. And here the caver is crawling through. And of course the swallowed hole where a stream runs underground. I know Anita Schlomer's here, this is out her area. It comes out across, goes underneath Marvin Shinkton property, a lot of sinkholes. And it crosses the road and comes out a 1/4 mile away. It's a cave probably still being formed. Particularly, I'm not too interested in digging in this type of cave, because even if it was the time of year where you would have to worry about flooding, come next spring all your work would be probably done away with. And trust me, there's so much work now with digging, we don't have to fool with this type of cave. Now, I don't know, anyone here superstitious? You want to all speak at once? You got 2 roads here in the county, and you get your choice. You're going to go to a cave on the Don Kinnard property, you used to own the cave, 69 feet deep, 9 interconnected domes. Now, you get your choice which road you want to use to reach this cave. Dead end, the cemetery. And from the looks of the sign, I think someone's already had a catastrophe here. You get to the cave, you rope off, you start using this only as a guideline. I'm not tied into the ropes. Don't get the idea that this is, I'm not really a vertical caver as such. Others have very good talents. You know, every caver has his own field of expertise. This is first room in the cave with tree roots to the ceiling. You can see them hanging down. Here again, very stable feature. Believe it or not, you'd think the water table would be lower on Brussels Hill. Yes, again, here only 23 feet down was the water table. But we stepped through into another domed room. And this here is one of the tight squeezes. You put your rump right here. And the first time down, one of the other guys was going to go head first. And I was joking. I said, no, I said, if you get stuck, we can't feed you that way. But let me tell you, he was glad he paid attention real close. Because as soon as he got through there, he was the thinnest one in our group. There's a 24-foot shaft. It's quite wide. You have to spread your feet apart and catch the ledges, or you're going to go down faster than you planned on. And it's very tight, and you've got to stay away from the front part of the bottom part of the slide here, or you have a tendency to fall into a crevice that's hard to get through. Goes down another couple drops to 69 feet. Now we're up on the south end of Brussels Hill, 20 feet less elevation than the highest point in Door County, where the radio towers are. And anyway, this is before a cart track was put on, going down the Brussels Hill pit cave entrance. Working your way down. I understand you used to have school groups going here from Southern Door High School, I can't imagine, but this is a vertical cave. You have to be really careful with what you're doing here. Use your hand and foot holds. This is looking back up from the middle level of the cave. Where I'm standing, it's another 6 feet down to floor level. You'll never guess what happened here. In June of 1986, cavers were digging here, and lo and behold, part of the floor gave way. Flowstone was broken apart in just one little teeny area to get through, and they entered a sealed chamber that had bones going back to the birth of Christ. And deer bones, 25% larger than any known deer today. And a snail that was never known to be this far north was found. And a lot of water animals, muskrat, beaver, are remarkable. And the Richter Museum at UWGB has these right now and are studying the cave. And the cave, like all these I showed you, are pretty much all gated. But another reason it was gated was the Hall of Dreams. And this particular room, 200 feet in length, 40-foot high ceiling, and flowstone dams, which are what you see on the floor here, unlike anything found elsewhere in Door County that I'm aware of. And it's just remarkable. We had to take our shoes off and walk in our bare feet just to try to not get the floor dirty here. Here's another view of this. This is the kind of stuff you'd see in what we call a show cave, or one that's been commercially developed. And I might add, people that do this, I should point out, are cavers, not spelunkers. You can always tell if someone knows caves, like a reporter net, they use the term spelunkers versus a caver. There's a bumper sticker that says Cavers Rescue Spelunkers. Here we are on Brussels Hill. A lineman told me when the new highway was put up, the new highway, which is now going to be the old highway, they found a 10-foot cavity here, and it was filled in to try to finish off. And the escarpment edge here, or the road cut edge, and we got a cave down in Manitowoc County that's a little bit of concern to us. And you can see here where frost action has dropped the whole slab down here. And that's something you got to always watch out for. But I suppose too, some of the construction and blasting could have already weakened that section. Snake Cave, north end of Brussels Hill. Cave coral up on the walls here. It forms only underwater. Here is a little lake or ponded water in the cave. And the fourth longest known cave in all of Door County, Bear Cave, about 156 or so feet in length. We found a little bit more since then, but not a lot. This particular cave, the center section collapsed, and so you can use a guideline and work your way down. This is near Fish Creek, near Hairpin Curve. Looking back out, if you look this way, you come into a room that's 12.5 feet across and 12.5 feet high. This is looking where you come in. This is looking the opposite direction. And then if you go the other way, it's smaller, but the passage is longer. And you crawl up over this breakdown or rock that is laying on the floor in the cave. And you can see one of the little lakes in the cave. Now, if I gave a talk on the caves of Door County and I didn't include Cave Point, I think I'd get thrown out of here. So this is Cave Point. I know none of you have ever seen this before, but here's a 40-foot long sea cave. You certainly don't want to try to enter this one with a boat on a windy day, or you're going to be in big trouble. They also have a blowhole to the south of the park where water rushes in, has no place to go, and shoots straight up through an opening in the rock. But as we speak of sea caves, here's a bigger one in Peninsula State Park. And if you want to see the nicest one in Door County, this is Eagle Cave. Now I'm standing right here. This is the most difficult cave to get to in Door County. We had to rock climb 30 feet straight up to get there. And the cave itself is 42 feet in length, and it's amply covered with, you guessed it, seagull droppings. And it's quite interesting, 45-degree angle upwards. You can't come down rappelling from on top. See the overhang? You'd be way too far out to get back into the cave. And this is looking back towards the shore and ice of the Bay of Green Bay. I have my cable ladder here, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And you can see each rung represents 1 foot. But what is a shame is that at one time, there was stair steps going up to the cave. But because of insurance reasons and that, the park decided to discontinue that. But this is a rare postcard I got from the 1920s showing where tourists were able to climb up to the cave. Now, as far as the slide presentation of my report goes, this concludes this part of the program, and I will talk a little bit on cave equipment. So thank you. At this time, I know you've got some questions about what's involved with caving. I'm just going to go through this This is great. The reason we use this is because when you get a lot of cavers in one vehicle, I've had cavers find out they had stuff in Madison, Milwaukee, different places. Keeps all your equipment together. Coveralls. You want to have coveralls because I once went in a passageway with a coat on. When I come to back up, the coat bunched, my hands were in front of me, and I was a little uptight until I realized coveralls is the ideal thing to use. Of course, gloves, enough said, you can't protect your hands enough when you're crawling on rock. Boots, deep cleats, because a lot of times you're on mud banks and that, you got to be able to climb and you got to have your hands available. So these are typical boots. Helmet, we always like 3 sources of light. I got a couple here, a little mag light, your batteries on the pack. There's different types of lights you can get, but it just shows. Also, you want to make sure you have a locking chin strap. Candles and matches. Now the matches aren't any good unless they're in a waterproof container. So here we got waterproof container. Of course, I just like the simple Skipper waterproof flashlights too. That's a good source. If you come to a low spot in a cave, in order to move forward, you have to dig a little pocket to try to get under. Collapsible shovel and hoe, that works great. Carbide lamps like they used to use. Water go in the top, carbide would go in the bottom. Start dripping, create a gas, nice bright flame would come out. The smaller versions of this can go on a helmet. In the smaller caves, cavers don't like to use this. I've already seen a situation where one head went on his helmet, and I remember one time going through Paradise Pit Cave, one of the cavers got a little too close to the gentleman in front of him. And let's put it this way, put her into 3rd gear real quick. I think his pants started smoking. What's wrong?
Carbide assist.
Carbide assist. When you're going in a cave, everything deals with weight, and you don't want to take and have problems having to carry much. Believe it or not, this is a stove. You got little pellets. This opens up, holds a pellet at a time. If you want to cook food in there to stay warm, this is a stove. And speaking along the same terms, if you want to go into a cave and be able to get down in, this is a cable ladder. And it would be nice to just open this to show you. Each rung is exactly 1 foot from the next rung. They're only 5.5 inches wide. Even though this weighs only 1 pound, 3 ounces, this has been tested 1,262 pounds of weight before it busted. Now you still want a belay, a rope belay, just in case you ever were to slip off from here. And I might add that when you climb a ladder like this, you don't climb a normal ladder with everything. You climb with both hands reached in from the opposite side and every other foot coming in from the opposite direction. Or suddenly you find yourself hanging like this. And you don't want to do that too often. Just a couple other little things here. If people want to come up later and look, I got a map of the complete Horseshoe Bay Cave system that you can study. Brochures. If anyone wants brochures, feel free. I don't know if I should hand these out, or if people just want to come up, feel free to pick up brochures, those that are interested. And Bob, at this time, Bob's our Cave Conservation Chairman, Bailey's Harbor. Do you want to say anything? Here's your two.
Well, we brought a couple of patches as well. If people are patch collectors, I guess this is the commercial portion of the presentation. I am the treasurer of the Wisconsin Speleological Society. It's $12 a year for an individual membership, or $15 a year for a family membership. We put out a newsletter once a month, and we try to get out a more scientific publication we call the Wisconsin Speleologist. Averages about once a year, but you could see me afterwards. I also have a table full of pamphlets and copies of our newsletter, copies of the National Speleological Society newsletter, different publications we've put out and different information, some photographs from bones that came out of Weequahic Cave down in Brown County, other interesting things if you want to talk to me afterwards. We sell our patches for $4. I'll also mention on Saturday, January 3rd, we are leading a trip into Horseshoe Bay Cave. As Gary mentioned, the owners back in the 80s approached our group and asked us as cavers if we would gate the cave. So Horseshoe Bay Cave has been gated since I believe it was 86, wasn't it? And so we take a group basically kind of advertise an annual trip in. They're happy to let us in. They prefer it in the wintertime. And as Gary said, it's generally, as long as we don't hit that January thaw, it should be about the driest time of the year in the cave. But if you want more information on that, or information on how to come prepared, talk to me afterwards.
I always am pleased. It seems like I always say everyone's been so quiet. Either they're very attentive, or else they're sleeping, one of the two. At this time, I would like to ask, this is your time to come forward with what might interest you. Do any of you have any questions on anything involving caves in any way, shape, or form? Does not have to be Door County either. I know one of the great experiences was Yugoslavia, where you go through on a train.
How did you photograph the interior of the caves? Did you have a special camera or special lights?
Okay, a lot of these are, like I mentioned about the total darkness of a cave being 40% darker, darkless, moonless night. A lot of these were a very talented person involved with slides. Ralph Erlinson out of Chicago, he's won awards nationally, and he sometimes will have extra slave lights. That is not a field that I'm really in. To be honest with you, a lot of these, there's a Tim Geyer in Green Bay, some of these slides. I try to get these from the experts in our group. We all have our different, Bob's conservation, I'm more into history, I know JD's conservation oriented. And so basically the photography, they have extra strobe lights and that would.
Thank you.
Yes, and any other questions about
What's the difference between a cavern and a cave? I've been into a Carlsbad cavern.
Okay.
And it's just size, or the way it's developed?
Basically it's size. Now show caves, depending, will sometimes use the names interchangeably. But if you've got a series of cave rooms, and especially if they're quite extensive and volume-wise, that could be referred to as a cavern. So generally speaking, if you want to know which it is, it's basically size. A cavern is 9 times out of 10 going to be considered much bigger than a cave. A grotto is just a single little alcove.
Do you have to worry about where you're going underground, whether you are trespassing on somebody else's property?
Okay, good point. What you do is you ask permission of the owner first. Now we got something here, and this is something I know that I'd be remiss, Bob would use this opportunity to bring up Wisconsin recreation law. Because of concerns over liability, things like that, there has been a law passed in Wisconsin, like I say, Wisconsin recreation law. And if you don't live within 1,000 feet of a cave, you do not charge admission to go in the cave, and you do not have any man-made ladder or something like a wooden ladder or something would give way, you cannot be sued for going into a cave. You get the permission of the owner. Technically in Wisconsin too, property lines run straight down the center of the earth. And there's some question. Some will argue and say that if you have the entrance, you have control of the whole cave, which you probably do from that respect. But generally speaking, from what I understand, and I'm pretty familiar with that, you own technically straight down.
So you could be trespassing on somebody's property, even though you got the legitimate right to go in there.
By the way, I will point out at this point too, Horseshoe Bay Cave, even though we've gone back 3,103 feet, that's counting side passing that, we are still well within the boundaries of Horseshoe Bay Farms. And we started back door dig one time, it was just huge. And we got to the point where it was unmanageable. We had to take and fill it in. There was just no way we could continue. So we know the cave keeps going, but still under the farms. Way in the back.
How do you know, say, if I found one of those places on my property, I don't have it, but just in theory, and call you, how do you know when you start digging that you aren't going to find one of those places where you drop down 16 feet? Or how do you start it, or how do you proceed actually? Know that you aren't going to fall in some hole somewhere.
Yes, well, sometimes when you get that close, usually there's some indications. It doesn't usually all of a sudden go at once. I mean, that's kind of dramatic, Just like they show dynamite, where you throw a stick of dynamite, in a cave and runs like crazy, you see all this smoke coming out. That's generally speaking. Bob, do you want to expound on that a little? On that, as far as how do you know it's not going to give way?
Well, I guess you get used to reading the rock and seeing how the sediments filled in, and again, with the glaciation here, time and time again, the glaciers came and went and came and went and came and went. And so typically, any opening in the ground was filled in to a great degree by even just sand and silt and fine sediments. And I guess you know, you're careful when you're digging. Certainly you know, we don't ever undermine our digs. Like Gary showed, we're always, from the top down, you're always finding bedrock, so you know you have solid rock. And there are times when you might excavate and part of the walls don't look stable, and so you have to monitor them. But typically you can tell if you're you know, usually there wouldn't be a situation where you would actually drop into nothing. That's kind of rare.
Did I see? Yes, you had a question.
What do you mean by dating? Dating the cave, I believe is what you said?
Radiocarbon 14 dating. The university did that. It's quite an expensive process. I think it costs like $250 to analyze a sample, and that was done. University, you know, took the sample, and it's dealing with the level of radioactive decay. I think Samantha could probably tell more on that. You're probably familiar with that angle of it, and but that is the means for dating a cave. You know, other than your more modern deals where you just do historical research, like newspapers. Yeah.
You're just dating something you found inside the cave, some bones or something.
That is correct.
Objects.
Yes.
How did we get lucky enough not to get any commercial caves in the area?
To not get any?
Yeah.
Well, to be completely
Tourist
honest,
caves, or how did that happen not to happen?
to be honest,
And how does it happen?
we do have one that's a semi-developed cave. It's Ledgeview Nature Center, and they don't have no tours anymore this year. But in the summer, it's 2 miles south of Chilton, which is about an hour, 45-minute drive from here. In fact, that's where we often meet. They do have guided tours, and it's semi-developed. They do have some stair steps. You would call the Nature Center and find out when they're having trips in that. The reason why we don't have any caves right here of quite the size and volume is because of the impact the glaciers had. Also, the rock is less able to be dissolved because it's a harder type of rock than your more soluble stones, like your limestones where Mammoth Cave area is and that. The reason Cave of the Mountains and the 4 or 5 show caves that we've got, Cave of the Mountains at Blue Mountains, Wisconsin, Crystal Cave at Spring Valley, and then we've got Eagle Cave at Richland Center and Kikkwinian Caverns at Wazeeka. The 4 of those are all in the unglaciated area, our driftless area of southwestern Wisconsin. So we had a little impact here, and the glaciers filled in too, so that technically Horseshoe Bay Cave could have been, if the owners would have wanted, that could have been enlarged up to the wall road, and we had walking passage, and a cave in Canada called Mindamoya Cave on Manitoulin Island. I cannot believe it. I took a picture of the entrance. Looks just like Horseshoe Bay Cave, except it's been dug out. And I mean, I could fool people. I could come back and show you that and say, you're never going to believe this. They've excavated and getting ready to open up Horseshoe Bay Cave. And you'd look at the two side by side, and they're both in Niagara Dolomite. They're both, you know, in part of the ridge of the basin, dipping under Michigan. So, geological trickery.
What skill level is that trip for Horseshoe Bay Farm in January?
What skill level? We're going to have, how are we going to work that part? We're going to have the 3 levels like that?
Yeah. I think it was, well, you talked about a little bit in the with the slides. The first about 300, 350 feet, it should be dry. Again, if we hit, you know, if we get a January thaw before, you know, or if we get that thaw early, it could be a little wet. But worst thing, you would get, you know, your feet a little wet. But the first 300 or so feet is relatively dry, and so it's stoop walking and a little bit of crawling and standing up in some of the dome rooms. And then beyond that, you probably going to want to wear a wetsuit if you want to go further. Trip to the big room takes about an hour and a half, and you really can't avoid getting pretty soaked. So, and then there are, I mean, again, you know, the cave goes much further, so there'll be trips even beyond, which you could make it to the big room. The water table's low enough now that you could actually make it to the big room without a wetsuit, but I wouldn't go any beyond the big room without a wetsuit these days.
What we did last time was those that are going way back in went ahead, and then we had a group. When we went over it, saw Welliver Cave. It was a quarter-mile walk. It was a nice walk. No need to get wet. Saw where the wedding was, then come back and went in 200-300 feet into the cave to where the water starts. And any of you could probably do that if you don't mind bending down a little bit, little duck walk. And I wear old clothes. You're going to definitely need something on your head. If nothing else, at least a stocking cap. And you each bring your own lights and meet at Murphy County Park.
Yeah.
And Having said that, JD, did you have something you want to
I
say?
can answer a couple more of the questions pretty easier. The reason why we
Stand
have
up so they can hear.
the reason why we have no show caves is that our caves are full of dirt. They take a lot of time, a lot of money to dig them out. A lot of the rooms that you saw on the slides, they're way back in. You're crawling through passages that are about that tall. So you're not going to get any tourists that go and crawl, belly crawl back to the nice passages. They could be dug out, but again, it takes a lot of time. A lot of times we have to go pail by pail. Everything, but so if you're going a couple hundred feet, that's a long hike for dirt. And that's why we have those show caves. But we do have show cave quality.
I don't want to get too long here because I know some of you might want to leave. I don't know if any of you want to look up closer. Otherwise, I'm perfectly free to keep answering questions, whatever is the wishes of community. Any other questions or yes?
What are the various ways that caves are discovered in the county? Could you list them off?
Well, right now, there's a number of ways, of course. Sinkholes are probably the most obvious where you look for a cave. Evidence of steam coming out of the ground would be another where then you'd have to excavate. We had a cave in Chilton called Carolyn's Caverns. Radio resistivity, I believe it was, where they did it. There is no, well, some will dispute it. It is my understanding, and to the best of knowledge from what I understand from authorities, there is no known device that can physically take and detect underground voids, short of drilling. Now, if you did 2-inch punch holes, sure, you could tell right away, if there's any voids there. And we have had some tremendous drops. I think one drop was 40 to 60 feet over in Martin Orchard area with a well drilling device. But I know the Pentagon is looking for any type of void detector. It'd be nice to put on glasses and look at the side of a mountain and see right where to go. I guarantee you'd see a lot of new show caves. And
Your winter time is the best time to look for caves. You're looking for the steam rings, the frost rings. Most of our caves go in the middle, like starting last month. Earlier in the morning, you'll see the frost ring. There's no other way. In the summertime, about the month of July, August, you'll feel cold breeze coming out of these holes. So we try to mark them, map them on the map, come back and keep on researching these places. But the winter is the best time to find a cave. It's hard to believe, but.
yes, way over there.
How did you first get involved in being interested in caves?
1961, I took a tour through the historic entrance to Mammoth Cave. And it just started growing and doing a lot of traveling and getting interested in it. And if you've ever seen that was your first cave and you're of the right age to just get it. There's a certain age in there. And we have whole families that are interested in caving, and the kids know nothing different than to go caving. And you had a question?
Yeah, I was just curious. Did you ever run into, if you're doing this caving in the middle of winter like this, do you ever run into bears that are hibernating?
No, but I will tell you, I've heard a story one time where a caver did crawl into a cave. I thought it was out in Minnesota, but I could have been wrong. And crawled in there, and there was something furry, didn't know what it was, and all of a sudden realized it was a hibernating bear. And he went out so quick. There was another caver, it was kind of on the edge, it was like a little drop-like. And if the other caver hadn't grabbed him, he would have gone right over the edge. He backed out that quick. And I do believe it, but it's a rare occurrence. It's not common.
If we had bears, there would be in the caves. The bears are gone, basically. Raccoons are very common. And sometimes porcupines. But I mean, raccoons.
Veterinarians will argue that point with you. I've been told by established veterinarians in our county here that we have more than 2 dozen bear.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, there are,
We got a bear in the county.
I'm sure there are a couple, but I mean, the frequency, you find them more commonly. Right now, with the population centers, it's easier for the bears to hibernate in swamps. But certainly, again, Gary mentioned that most of our caves are along the escarpment. Well, that's where all the homes are too, and all the development, and so.
They stay away from that.
Right, typically.
Eric.
I was in Horseshoe Bay Cave in the 70s, and I was moving along, and all of a sudden an animal came at me real fast, and I didn't realize what it was, and I thought my life was over with. But it was a dog, and there was other people further in. But what's the furthest you've traveled to go to a cave, and where?
Well, it depends what you mean. The deepest underground I've ever been in a cave is about 829 feet. Sounds impressive until you say it's on the show cave route of Carlsbad Caverns. The most extensive was I took a course, and it was a 1-week course offered by Western Kentucky University in Mammoth Cave National Park. And in 1 week, even with lectures, we did over 33 miles of passageway, and a lot of it was walking. I was so uptight that before I took it, because I was envisioning, crawling. I thought, how will I ever last past the first day? But it was all a lot of ex-commercial trails and then wild sections. And if you want to know the ruggedest, most trip I've ever taken, I still would have to say, if you go to the back end of Horseshoe Bay Cave, it explains why it's the only cave left that we don't have completely explored. I mean, even to get diving equipment back there, you get so tired on the way out that I know Bob will attest to this, and that you just want to put your hands on your side to rest your upper arm muscles and literally roll, trying to get yourself a rest and get a few feet closer to the entrance where you can suddenly stand up. And it's a journey to the center of the earth. You've been back there? Yeah. Allison's can tell you more things. Yes. Excellent.
Along Bayshore Drive, south of Monument Point Road,
yes,
there are places where from the high bluff, you can see in the water where the water is coming up, I guess from underground through the rocks. Would that be considered a cave or an underground stream?
Probably a conduit, yes. We got a couple spots we know of. If we just had the heavy equipment in that, we got the sinkholes on the top, and Bob knows right what I'm talking about, north of Horseshoe Bay, in fact, north of Welliver Cave even, and it'd be an excellent spot to. Yes?
Difference between a spelunker and a caver.
Cavers rescue spelunkers. That's a Latin term, spelunking. That's a Latin term, and most of the time when they talk about people, J.D., Allison, Bob, Anita here, we'd all be referred to as cavers. And that's the term they prefer when you go to a convention and that. And if you ever read in an article, you can tell if a reporter has done her job well a lot of times in asking questions, because if you see the word spelunker, you can tell it's someone that's right and probably isn't a caver or very knowledgeable in that area. I think we agree with that, Bob? Or?
Yeah, typically in the caving community, and I still don't perfectly understand it myself, because you would think with more scientific sounding, but that's just the way it's evolved, and I'm sure that came from Kentucky and Virginia and the heart of caving country, where spelunker, the term spelunker kind of means a weekend person who doesn't know what they're doing.
We try never to lose more than one person on a trip too, but the showcase say if you don't come out, they'll refund your money.
This is a question about safety. How far, I imagine there's at least one other person with you at a time. How far would you be ahead of them? How would you communicate back to them if you got in trouble?
Excellent point. I want to tell you a story. It's really fascinating. We've got people, this is really one of the better questions tonight, because it's going to open up an opportunity here to say something. When you go caving, now first off I want to point out, if you got someone at home, you got a son or something who's going in a cave, they say, oh yeah, they'll be back at 6 o'clock. Figure if they're back by 10 o'clock, you're probably doing pretty good. The last thing you want to do is sit back in a nice living room and rush someone that's in a cave, because everything always takes longer than you expect. Usually we go together as a group, and we're within communicating distance. We did an experiment in Horseshoe Bay Cave, remarkable, and this happened, I was chairman of the grotto at the time, and we tried to do an experiment with underground radio. We had a guy by the name of Bill Madden, many of you might know him, he lives up near Valmy, and he had walkie-talkies. Now everyone says they don't work in a cave, they won't work. Well, he took his walkie-talkies, we put them in a waterproof container. I gave one to Lois Ole here, who happens to be my mother at age 86, put it in a car, had the antenna out the window. We went in the back of Horseshoe Bay Cave, or I should say in the front. We worked our way through. It took hours and hours of working our way through. At various points, we'd stop. We'd open it up, by golly, if we had perfect communication. Well, we were going to test, we wanted to have direct communication, because we were going to have a very involved dive trip. I wasn't a diver, I'm not, trust me, that's a whole new field. We wanted to be able to have communication with the surface. And late that night, even though we went in real early, we got back there, and when the diver did his dive, we communicated. Well, now, it was really late, it was wee hours of the morning. She had her antenna sticking out the car window, sitting at Horseshoe Bay Farms. We're out in the middle of the country, 2, 3 in the morning, and it sounded just like she was right with us. It was remarkable. There was a shooting star. And we were thinking later how crazy this was, because here you are, that far underground, and couldn't you see it if a cop would have come by and And man, what are you doing? It looks like a lookout for a crime or something. And then their next line would be, well, I'm communicating with the underground. And needless to say, it worked really good because she wasn't worried. We wanted to experiment with it. To this day, except for Horseshoe Bay, it can't be duplicated. They took the exact same walkie-talkie, brought over to a cave in Minnesota. They tried it. Doesn't work.
The question about safety, though, is really important, and that's something that we stress a lot. And as new people come into the group, it's usually something that people kind of get initiated right from the get-go about safety. Gary mentioned the proper equipment. Certainly, everything from your comfort in the cave to being safe. All those things come into play. But we always cave at least in pairs, and you don't go out of voice range. And it's amazing sometimes with these narrow passageways or winding passageways, you don't have to be that far away, and you can really get out of voice range fast. But
major caves, they like to have, say, 3 people. And most of the caves in northeast Wisconsin, except for Horseshoe Bay, that aren't major, and Paradise Pit is somewhat in between because you don't have quite the water problems. But with 3 people, one can go for help while another stays with a person if there were to be a problem. But we've never had anything major happen in Wisconsin. Other areas of the country, yes, vertical falls and pits and that does happen. And cave diving is a whole other world. We're going to talk about that. That is something else. But yes, another question. I've got a lot of questions. I don't know if they want. That's fine.
Do you ever have to back out a long ways?
Back out a long ways. Well, there's a big joke about when we have our annual, that's another thing. We have an event called Hodag Hunt. People are welcome to that. We usually rent at fairgrounds. We've had it 4 times here in Wisconsin. We go to caves in a group. And the big joke is you don't want to be the 6th person into a group because you got to wait while the first 5 back out so you can have your turn to go in. And but the answer is yes, you do have to. We are in the process of working towards, I know JD, Bob have been active, Allison here, trying to connect 2 caves. And we're real close to connecting 2 caves in a nature center. And when they get done at the end of the day, they all have to back out because you can't, it's kind of hard to get around one another. You could after a little while, but at least in the beginning. And so yes, you do have to back up very often. Not a lot, but sometimes. Not any otherwise, I was going to, well, okay.
Does your group take donations?
absolutely. We have several gating projects in the works right now. We gate caves to protect them from vandalism. We gate caves to protect the bats. There's one thing that really didn't get talked about tonight, but caves are a major bat hibernaculum. Bats that, they hibernate in the wintertime, and they can't just hibernate out under your eaves here, or, out on the outside of the building because they freeze. And so they need places like caves. They need to get away from the bitter cold temperatures of winter. They need to get into that stable 46, 47 degree place. And so we work to put gates on to protect certain bat hibernating areas, and of course that means special gates so that the bats can still fly in and out. We're also we're working on, we have a draft proposal for a cave protection law in the state, and outreach programs and education, things like this that we bring talks and tours to folks around the state. So yeah, we'll definitely, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and it is a tax-deductible donation.
JD, did you have anything in any area at all that you wanted to mention? I don't know how
Talk
long
to
we
JD
want to
afterwards,
go here.
because he's a
I don't want to
wellspring of
switch. You all seem like you're still interested. I don't see too much shuffling, but I don't want to go too long either. Eric?
Do you have some type of strategy as to when you have your last meal, so you're unlikely to have to go to the bathroom anymore?
Excellent point. I'll tell you, you don't want to be in the back end of Horseshoe Bay Cave in a wetsuit and suddenly find that you've got problems. I know a caver from Green Bay, a well-known caver, and he tells me he makes ample use of honey, and in addition to timing your meal thing and that. And I have found out, though, I will say one thing along the same lines, a little bit different. When we come out of Horseshoe Bay Cave, and I can't speak for some of these other cavers here, but for me, when I come out of Horseshoe Bay Cave, even though I'm very, very hungry, I'm usually so tired that for me, it's always sleep first. And worry about eating later. Others, maybe food is number one, but for me, it's just, you're so sheer tired. But you're right, honey is one thing that helps.
So like, your last meal would be like 3 hours before you cave, just? Or,
I don't know, what would you say, Bob?
And then go with honey?
JD?
See, so our caves aren't that big that we're
Horseshoe Bay.
I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, Horseshoe Bay would be the one where you would really, because otherwise you're close enough to the entrance. But, yeah, I mean, in Horseshoe Bay, again, it's a lot of hands and knees crawling. If you go past the duck under and you go beyond, past the big room, you're in a wetsuit, it can be kind of hard to move sometimes. You're often crawling through, water up to here. You've got a little bit of headroom, moving along, and so you definitely need energy. I mean, you can't, go in there on an empty stomach. But
so would you fast for a couple hours and then just rely on honey?
By the time you get there and get suited up, I usually just, eat a big breakfast, and then, high energy breakfast, and then by the time I get there and get suited up, and, it's been a couple hours since I ate. But I mean, it's something you do got to think of, especially in situations. I mean, that's more of a concern in more southern areas where you have larger caves. Where you're actually having to pack out your waste. You bring a thermos bottle just for that, or in baggies and stuff. And you read the stories, especially in places like La Chiquilla Cave in New Mexico, and these caves where they're were broken into and they're pristine. They have serious rules about every aspect of what you do, and that's one big thing is to you pack it out.
I'm going to wrap this up now because I know that there's some that might want to leave. Others are glad to stay. We're in no rush, but I know they want to probably shut down the nature center too. The only thing I'm going to say, if any of you know of any caves, or be glad we're mapping, we don't charge for our service or anything, just let us know about it. Any one of us, we're glad to try to talk to you. Summing it up, the caver's slogan: take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but footprints, kill nothing but time. Thank you.